Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. And if you're wondering about the different environment, I may or may not be cat sitting. So if you hear um, that in the background, that's why. Somebody insisted she had to come in, and 30 seconds later insists that she has to go out. So I think she'll get to live indoors for a little bit.
All right. Well, kitty cats aside, if you're returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we usually do is we do some reviews, something old and then something classic.
Mhm.
And of course, we've also got our weekly review of the new X-Men '97 episode. But before we get into all of that, we like to talk about the box office.
Yeah, and God, another remake. Yeah, and this Civil War doesn't even have the snazzy uniforms or the cool music from the last one.
Oh darn!
Yeah, and Nick Offerman is no Abraham Lincoln. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, the big new release of the weekend was Civil War, an A24 picture, and this might be their biggest opening weekend now that I think about it, because like, they usually do their weird super staggered release where they'll release in like 10 theaters and then 100, then 80, then 200, and it's just weird to track.
Yeah. They did that with everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, I just had to take a look, see what the opening was on that, just for curiosity's sake.
And
Uh,
good to see you, Ninja.
yeah, 500,000 opening weekend on everything everywhere. So this is like A24's first normally released movie I can think of.
Mm.
25. It brought in 25 million on a uh, $50 million budget.
Mm.
Not doing much internationally. It was like 2 million after nearly a week.
Yeah, I don't know how the premise for this movie would play with international audiences.
I mean, you'd think it'd be big in Iran or places like that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, this is okay. She is getting too obnoxious. I will be right back.
All right. Yeah, I've heard the same thing, Ninja. That yeah, Civil War is a bit mid. Um, but uh, but yeah, so looking at it here, another dip for Godzilla, Godzilla Kong, Godzilla X Kong, which I'll have to have DB pull up the chart on that one because we are seeing a bit of a sperm whale of sadness. Not a big one, but a slight one with that. Um, let's see.
And the cat was nowhere near the door when I got to the door, so I don't know what she wants.
Yeah,
She has food, so she should be fine.
yeah. Hey, cats can be that way.
Indeed, they can.
Yeah,
But anyways, yeah, Civil War. Haven't heard great things about it. It's just like, eh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was just talking about Godzilla X Kong taking another dip. If I was looking at the chart on it, and there is a little bit of a sperm whale of sadness going with that one.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. See.
Yeah, it's like a sheepish sperm whale of sadness.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who are wondering what the heck we're talking about, for the charts they do here for the numbers, imagine a sperm whale with its large upper part of its head and then its much smaller and narrower jaw.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes they're just outright gaping open, but in this case, it's more just like, oh.
Oh. Yeah.
Um, Although it's doing significantly better than Ghostbusters,
Mm.
which after a month it'll probably hit 100 million sometime this week.
But well, not the showing they were hoping for with this one.
Yeah, no, they put extra money in this compared to the last one, and still not as much as the 2016 Ghostbusters, which is kind of nuts when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like those reshoots really cost them. But
Yeah.
it's a Sony picture, so it's going to go to Netflix or other places that they can rent it out. So in the long run, it'll work out for them.
Yeah, yeah. But although I don't know what that means for future Ghostbusters movies.
Um, I think there was some sort of animated one in the works. That's probably still going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I can't confirm that though. I just kind of forget. And oops, sorry, touchscreen. As long as we're here on Dune, Dune is like the one movie this year that isn't playing towards the bottom of its run.
Yeah. Yeah, it's doing very well. Oh, it's almost at $666 million.
Mm. It's at
Oh,
685.
685. Oh, okay. I couldn't see the 8 very well.
Yeah, and we're looking at 685 and change as of yesterday. So almost guaranteed to hit 700 million.
Yeah.
Because it's out of the top 10, but it's still plugging away every weekend. It,
Yeah.
it even added 8 theaters, which is interesting. No,
Yeah.
no, never mind. Never
Oh,
Dune
that
lost
was
some theaters.
yeah.
Yeah. It was just sitting too close to its competitor Monkey Man, which
Oh, yeah.
at first I was like, oh wow, I mean it doubled its first opening weekend. That must be some really good word of mouth. And oh right, time moves in a forward direction, and it's actually been out for 2 weekends now.
Yeah.
Not as impressive though. It was a cheap movie to make at 10 million, so it's like
Yeah.
everyone's probably happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kung Fu Panda 4 at fourth place continues to be a bit on the underwhelming side, but you know,
Yeah. Well, they didn't spend as much money on that one, so
no. So that one's probably good ROI. And I misspoke. Dune Part 2 is actually in the top five. It looks like it actually moved up a position from last week, which is interesting.
yeah. Well, had not a whole lot of new stuff coming out. And,
Yeah. Other interesting ones. Shrek 2 actually came out last weekend
hmm.
for a 20th anniversary production.
Wow, that makes me feel old. I remember seeing
Yeah.
that. I remember seeing that in the theater.
Somebody once told me.
Hmm.
Then we got what looks like a Spanish language one here, the long game, or at least it's. Oh, but I didn't actually watch that film threat review, though I saw this poster's familiar.
Yeah. Oh, it's a golf movie.
Historical golf movie about a group of Mexican American teenage caddies who decided they're tired of being segregated against.
Uh, yeah, yeah, Ninja. Yeah.
What did Ninja say?
Yeah, that film was 20 years old. Yeah, he's survived
Yep.
by yeah, Shrek 2 being 20 years old.
Yep.
Mm.
As far as other things, there's not really a whole lot else to report on. Jokes aside, I do admire. It seems like A24 is the only major funding outfit that's really putting anything serious behind original concepts.
Yeah.
I just don't see. Civil War apparently had a budget of 50 million, which is right about in the category that we've been advocating for on this show. If you want to actually, not have huge disasters every time you try a movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The days of the $200 million blockbuster are slowly fading away, if not faded away already.
Yeah, at least they're on hiatus until they can come up with some better blockbusters.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, well, speaking of blasts from the past,
Yes.
so we had another X-Men episode.
Yeah. And
Wow, such enthusiasm in your voice, Daniel.
yeah, so sorry. It was all right. It was fine. It wasn't like last week's episode, but it was.
It was better off than episode 4, though. Man, poor Storm. They just do not seem to think that she can carry her own episode for some reason.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Her story was the B plot in not one but two episodes.
Which, if you add them together, now I've heard people argue that the stuff with Xavier was the B plot, but I just don't see it
I don't either.
because it's like, usually what you start with is your A plot if you're cutting back and forth.
Yeah.
and it seemed to be driving things much more often. Honestly, the Storm stuff with the Life, Death, and Forge and the Adversary,
Mm.
it really just felt like an afterthought.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was. I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. The way I felt about it, it was just kind of. It almost felt like filler. Like they just almost like they had to. Storm lost her powers, and then it's like, okay, well, she needs to quickly get her powers back, or just kind of just give her powers back and just be done with it.
I think the big issue with the whole Storm storyline, and let's see, do we want to throw up a spoiler alert or yeah, spoiler alert
Yeah,
because this is hard to talk about without getting into spoilers. I
yeah,
guess from a production standpoint, the animation continues to be mostly good, aside from some scenes where they have dropped frame rates, and you got to see some cool stuff from the Marvel Cosmic Universe, like Shi'ar fighting with Kree, so that was cool.
yeah. And Ronan the Accuser makes an appearance.
Yep.
Uh,
As does Deathbird and the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. So
yeah, yeah.
a thought I didn't really have until I saw Deathbird in this is that is it just because Deathbird kind of Blackfire from Teen Titans with serial numbers uh, ground off.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I've I'm I'm not the biggest Teen Titans comics fan, but I've read enough to go, wait a minute, these two ideas are kind of similar. And X-Men and Teen Titans were kind of in competition for a big chunk of the 70s and 80s for that top slot. So it kind of makes sense that they would riff on each other. Uh,
Yeah.
that's where Terra from Teen Titans came from, actually, was them going, well, what if we had a Kitty Pryde character, but she was actually an irredeemable villain? But back to X-Men.
Yeah.
We could talk about the B plot first uh, because that's a continuation from episode four's B plot.
Yeah.
Um, I think the big issue with it, this is kind of, I kind of have always thought of Storm as a character that I appreciate, but I don't really like all that much.
Hmm.
Like I've heard Comics Perch talk on his show about how he thinks that you could make a Storm ongoing comic series work if you gave it the right angle and like if you had her do cool things all the time. And maybe, but I also
Mm.
kind of feel like and I think this is part of why back in the 80s they had the idea to take her powers away for a while, is that she's a little bit hard to challenge on a power scale. Although it's weird because your powers don't actually make her any more durable, so she's like a glass cannon, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what you end up doing with her is mainly just focusing on her inner struggles. Uh, in particular with this series, and then the first series was her dealing with her claustrophobia.
Right, and that's the other thing, is that like while I'm not the biggest Storm fan in the world, she's a very well drawn character in the sense that I'd say a well drawn character, you can put them in any situation and more or less know how they'll respond.
Yeah.
Like Storm has some triggers, like like the big one being her claustrophobia. In this case, and also she's had a very strange life because she was a she her parents died in a plane crash, and then she was trapped in a air pocket, I think, beneath like where the crash had happened, which is where she got her claustrophobia from. And then she was forced to be a thief on the streets in Egypt. And then her mutant powers came in, and she was literally worshipped as a goddess by an African tribe. And then she became a superhero. Like, girl's been all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
No wonder she doesn't know what her self esteem is.
Yeah. And didn't she have a relationship with Black Panther at one point?
Yeah, that came later.
Okay.
Although they tried to retcon it that she had always had a relationship with Black Panther. That 2000s Black Panther run was not very good in retrospect,
Mm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and Ninja says Storm. He always thinks Storm is best when she's with a group. Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with that. Storm is one of those characters like oh, Colossus. I don't think you could have a ongoing solo Colossus comic book because he's meant to be part of a group.
yeah. And he also says his favorite time with Storm was when she was involved with the New Mutants when they had to rescue Karma from the Shadow King.
I'm not super familiar with that era, unfortunately.
Uh, but yeah, and of course you had the whole her whole dynamic with Forge, which just seemed really rushed.
Yeah, I mean, the first episode they were really together. They were declaring their love for each other. It's like, wait, what?
But yeah,
Uh, and this one, it's like it's treated like they've been friends for a long time. It's like I know that some things were happening off camera, but you didn't give us a sense of time.
yeah. And yeah, and they had the adversary, right? That was the name of the bird god demon thing.
Okay, did I miss something? Like, did it seem weird when Forge was suddenly had like his shaman gear and was casting spells to try to bind this thing?
Yeah, that seemed a little out of character or out of place.
Right, which he's a complex character and that was actually part of his stuff in the comics, but boy, they did not set that up at all.
Yeah. Ninja says it's the first New Mutants run. It was also done by Claremont.
Right, I've read some of that, like Cypher dying and their crossover with Thor when the New Mutants got stranded in Asgard, but I haven't read a whole lot of it.
Okay.
I there's a decent amount of old comics that I got lucky that somebody had donated them to my local library when I was a small child.
Uh,
That's actually what introduced me to Deadpool.
oh. But
Yeah,
but
war
yeah,
with me
so
forever after.
yeah.
The other thing is that, so in the first episode, we had some moments of anime logic with like Beast crawling inside of a Sentinel, pulling some wires around and riding it like a mecha,
Yeah.
and that seemed weird. I guess Storm's mutant powers, once they return, also include the ability to grow hair and generate a costume.
Yeah. Which Ninja pointed out too, yeah.
And it's like I get that it's symbolic of her kind of going back to like becoming herself again,
Yeah.
and that old black costume of hers was always a better suit for her than the Jim Lee white costume from the 90s. But that's one of those things where you wouldn't have necessarily had to rush it if you'd given her her own episode and a half or her own episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, the whole episode, well, that whole thing was it was the symbolism of her reclaiming her power.
Yes, exactly. But
Yeah.
eh, when it's a universe like okay, like I'm going to give an example here. It, let's hear if in I don't know Naruto or One Piece, a character hits self-realization and their clothing suddenly spontaneously changes to reflect that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think too much of it because it's like, okay, well, this is a world where weird stuff happens on the regular, so I'll just accept it. But the X-Men world, like aside from the presence of mutants and aliens and stuff, is the world outside our window. So like a costume spontaneously generating kind of demands an explanation
Yeah.
if you're being critical of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Now, and also the adversary, unfortunately, because Storm's character growth is half baked, the adversary himself comes off, or herself, I guess, comes off as half baked
Yeah.
because there's not really like because it's everything's on fast forward. There isn't even the opportunity to really show Storm being tempted by the idea of just being a normal human because being a normal human has been so miserable for her.
Yeah.
it's not like there was ever a moment where like, and that would actually have been something you could have done if you'd like if you weren't gonna do this Forge storyline in one episode, it could have been like sprinkled in as 5-minute bits over the course of the season as a on recurring B plot in every episode. You
Yeah.
never had any time where Storm was shown the advantage of being human outside of her intellectually going, well, it's hard out there for mutants.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was watching that, it kind of reminded me of to go to the Bible when Jesus was in the desert and being tempted by the devil. And I thought maybe they would kind of go with something like that, where having having Storm, like you were saying, having Storm seeing visions of being a normal human, and see how great it would be for you if you were a normal human, and
Right, you wouldn't have to worry about prejudice.
yeah, and yeah,
Which and you and Storm can you and Forge can go off and be happy together. And
right, yeah,
it's like, unfortunately, because it was fast forwarded, the temptation also felt fast forwarded and forced. So
yeah,
it's just genuinely unsatisfying.
yeah. But then we got the A plot with the return of Charles Xavier.
Which, okay, I had wondered what the heck was going on, because I thought that the show was just treating as non-canon the ending of the original series where Charles went into space to get fixed up.
Yeah, but nope, nope, he's still there, and he's engaged to the Empress. Oh, I lost her name.
Alondra.
Alondra, yes, Alondra. And they first met, I think, what, in like the second or third season.
It was around the time of the Phoenix storyline.
Okay, so that would have been like season 2, I think,
Yeah.
if my memory is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But
Yeah.
Lilandra was Charles's main love interest. He's had a couple of potential love interests in the comics, but the show treated Lilandra as the main thing.
Yeah. And so she's decided that she wants to make him the her husband, and he's going to become a leader. But there are some people who in the Shi'ar who are not too happy about that.
Yeah, and I will say that I think that the episode building was a bit better here, because I was noticing things like aliens of different species than the Shi'ar seemed to be doing a lot of the menial labor when we were looking around,
Yeah.
even before we kind of got into the storyline of it being about being anti-colonialist.
Yeah. Yeah. Which what was your how did you phrase that?
So at the end, Charles uses his brain powers to force everybody into a classroom, and he is about as subtle as a brick through a window.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that anything he said was incorrect; it's more that it wasn't as sophisticated as some of the other elements have been in the other episodes. And
Mhm.
it's like these Shi'ar had never heard anybody object to the idea of their empire before.
Yeah, which you would think that there would have been other alien species out there who would have objected to it at some point.
At the very least, we know that the Kree don't want to get on board with the program.
Yeah. Although the Kree have their own issues.
True. And it occurs to me that the Kree didn't come out of nowhere, because uh, Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, is canon to the X-Men 97 cartoon, which means
Yes.
that presumably the Kree superpowers that she had are also canon to it.
Yes. And of course, Rogue has those powers.
Exactly. Uh, that wasn't so much coming out of nowhere as getting to finally see an element that was implicitly there the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, But I will say that the stuff with Charles and Lalandra was much more interesting than the stuff with Forge and Storm,
Yeah.
especially at the moment where Charles gets a billion. voices cried out at once and then were immediately silenced
Yes. Yeah.
when the Sentinels attack.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of why the Storm storyline got rushed, is because they end her after she's gotten her powers back and she's stopped. Apparently, like, not only did Storm seal her powers shut, but she was also subconsciously wanting them shut. So that's why they weren't coming back when Forge was trying his best.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that part of it didn't really. I'm glad you explained that, because that part didn't really make sense. Like, oh yeah, well, where did her powers? How did they just came back? Like,
yeah, as far as I could tell, what was going on there was that so her powers were actually suppressed by the whammy, and I
mhm.
got the impression that uh, either it had worn off, or Forge's efforts had actually borne some fruit and had helped her get her powers back, but she was just subconsciously not wanting them anymore.
Uh,
Either way, I took that moment of self-realization and actualization to fix things.
mm. Okay, so it's kind of like Spider-Man 2, when
Yeah,
when his powers stopped working and he can't figure out why, and it's because didn't subconsciously he didn't want to be Spider-Man anymore.
right. Which I don't know if that's 100% the show's interpretation, but that's kind of how I was taking it. Because otherwise, Storm getting her powers back at a dramatically convenient moment doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. But yeah, so the episode ends with like what DB was saying. Charles, he sees the vision of everybody dead, including Gambit, which might be a reference to him, how he'll come back, which is being Death, one of Apocalypse's four horsemen.
Which I never read that particular storyline. A lot of people have gotten to be Death. Archangel was Death.
Mm.
Wolverine was Death in that storyline where gave him his adamantium back.
Uh,
Um, let one of the X-Men who gets turned evil for a bit be Famine or something.
yeah.
But yeah, overall, this is the second worst episode of the series. And unlike episode 4, it wasn't painful to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
Just the Storm thing made me sad.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and I guess mid would be the right word for it,
As the Zoomers say, yes.
as Gen Z would say. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad the show is usually better than this. So hopefully, now that we've gotten all the elements on stage to get everybody to come back and reunite as the classic team,
Mhm.
we can have an upswing again. Also, it makes sense why Charles is still in the opening.
Yes. Yeah. That part always got to me. Like, well, why do they keep showing him in the opening? It's like, yeah, because I thought he was dead, quote unquote, but
Right. Now that I think about it, if that last episode from the old series was still canon, he wasn't even comic book dead. It's just that people were. It's weird because they kept talking about him like he was dead. Like, everybody there, in theory, just thought he was gone forever. Uh,
yeah,
Elsewhere, living with Lalandra, which you would still miss him. But it's like it's a different sentence to hear your grandfather is dead and your grandfather has been taken away by an alien and you may never see him again.
yeah. And Ninja says, I look forward to Charles returning, going, I left for 1 year and this happened. What the hell, Scott?
Look. Technically, this is what happens when you put Magneto in charge. Whenever X-Men Magneto's in charge of the X-Men in any capacity, things go to crap. See
Yeah.
Age of Apocalypse.
Yes.
Even if it isn't really his fault.
Yeah.
Man, I just do not have a transition for this.
Well, one animated uh, people with superpowers to another group of animated people with superpowers, I guess.
Speaking of people who are mistreated because of their power levels,
Yes.
solo leveling.
Yes. Yeah, we took in the first 4 episodes of this new series. which is, I guess, also either a manga or light novel series.
It's a Korean manhwa.
It's Korean. Okay. Um, and it's basically set in a world not unlike Magpie Wizard, where a bunch of portals start opening up and a bunch of like creatures come out and create these dungeons, and then all of a sudden, people started getting superhuman abilities, magical abilities.
Once I'm done with the lawsuits from George McDonald Fraser for stealing his Flashman idea, uh, uh, I'll be turning around and countersuing Solo Leveling to make up for it.
Yes.
But yeah, but in all seriousness, so apparently this is kind of the popular new paradigm for a lot of isekai stuff. So like a lot of isekai or a lot of light novels in Japan start off on these fan websites, and then publishers snap up the rights to the ones that are really popular on there.
Yeah.
Which partially explains why so many Japanese light novel have pretty amateur writing. Um, but this whole idea of like the fantasy world invading the real world and people like have going to dungeons to fight it. I wonder if Soul Leveling is the one that started it, because it seems like this one was being read by everybody.
Probably, yeah.
Like somebody at work I was talking with about this show was kind of surprised that I hadn't been reading it.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but yeah. So this show asks the interesting question. Okay, it's like we always have the super powered people. What happens if your powers just kind of suck?
Yeah. Yeah, which is the case with Jin Woo,
Sung
Jin
Jinwoo.
Sung Jin Woo. Yeah, he so all of they're called so the people with powers are called hunters, and they're ranked like, like a typical ranking system. You got S class and then A through E, and Jin Ho is an E rank, and not just any E rank. He's like the lowest of the low.
He is the very bottom of the scale, has
Yeah.
just enough power to be worth employing.
Yeah, which he finds difficult, and he has a of course the little tragic backstory. His mother is basically comatose.
Yeah, she's been
Uh,
poisoned by the magic that is flowing into the world.
yes, and she's suffering from what they call eternal sleep, and so he has to pay, take on these jobs to pay her medical bills. Plus, his younger sister is in high school, about to go to college, and
Right.
has to figure out how to pay for that. And he's not making any real money doing his dungeon raids, because he doesn't do much, so he doesn't get a whole lot of coin for it.
Right. And in this story, this it's very non-gamey to start with, because basically it's like, okay, well, whatever magic you got, you got.
Yeah.
Hey, you got the potential to be the worst E rank person ever. Sucks to suck.
Right. Yeah. And so the first two episodes, he's part of a raid on this, basically on a dungeon within there's a dungeon within a dungeon. And he's there
Right.
with, yeah, he's there with a friend of his who's a girl, and I can't remember her name, but she's a healer. Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because I think she clearly likes him, and he
yeah.
just hasn't figured it out.
Yeah, eh, he does seem a bit clueless when it comes to the ladies liking him. Uh,
Or for that matter, most things.
oh yeah, most things, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, it's like first they clear out the normal sized dungeon, then they find a hole to another dungeon. And the thing is, like every dungeon, it's very interesting with all this like East Asian media, things like My Hero Academia uh, or One Punch Man. This kind of fits in the category where everything is categorized.
mhm,
Your powers are immediately ranked, And when a hole opens, we can just use magical sensors of some sort to gauge what threat level it is. So we can send in an appropriate party.
Right. Yeah. And the other part of it too is that they all have all the dungeons have a boss, and then once they defeat the boss, they have like I think it's like 20 minutes before the dungeon disappears. So they got that time to loot the place and get out.
Right. And the loot they get, the monsters themselves, their bodies have these gems that produce magical energy that is basically free power.
Yeah. Which, yeah, they even talk about in the show trying to use that instead of using fossil fuels and coal and all the other things that we use as energy sources.
They also make the point that the monsters, when they invade our world from the portals, they are immune to conventional weapons, which is why you have to have people dressed like fantasy adventurers deal with these problems.
Right. Yeah. Um, so the party that Jinwoo is with, they go into the second dungeon, and of course it's a trap.
Yes, and I gotta say, so this is like the back half of episode one, front half of episode two.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't usually like these shows where they just seem to go edgy boy for the sake of it,
Yeah.
but this was effective. You definitely felt the menace of them having to fight these enormous god statues.
Yeah, and they just all start getting picked off one by one in very gruesome fashion. Uh,
Yeah, like they make good use of the quiet moments between moments of terror to build to build that suspense.
yeah, yeah, and there was one character in there. As soon as he started talking about like, oh, I just had another kid, and I'm trying to get
Oh,
money for my family. I'm like, oh no, you did not just say that.
oh man, you never admit that.
Yeah, that's like that's the veteran cop. I'm 3 days from retirement.
Mendoza.
Yeah, and during the whole thing though, Jin Woo actually kind of figures out like how it works inside there, and
Right.
um, and
So you get
then
a very good sense that he's like because he hasn't isn't powerful, he's had to develop his cleverness, his situational awareness, his ability to sneak around. So
mhm.
he puts all that to good use to save the lives that he manages to save.
Yes, but then he ends up getting just thrashed and ripped apart. But then right before he's about to die, he gets this like video game notification pop up in front of him and tells him, well, you're about to die. If you don't accept this or whatever, your heart's gonna stop. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And
Yeah, your heart will stop in 0.02 seconds.
yeah,
And so then this was the part of the show where I was like, okay, this is where it becomes like a video game, which I'm usually not a fan of. Like
hmm
my first time trying to read Shield Hero, I literally stopped and returned the book on Amazon as soon as I hit the section where I realized that the characters had heads up displays.
yeah,
I eventually got more used to it as I got more versed in isekai shows, but still,
yeah,
like that's still just like at my core. It's a turn off for me to video gamify things.
yeah. And I felt that way with the hidden dungeon only I can enter. Although that one's more of a harem fantasy than
What you mean
anything
with that
else.
vaguely suggestive title?
Yeah.
Um, but so what you find out is that now they did seem to kind of retcon something because they said, oh, you're always stuck with whatever level you have.
Mhm.
But then the agency goes, well, the only way you could have survived is if you had a rare second emergence or whatever they called it.
I think it was Awakening. Yeah.
Second awakening, that's it.
Yeah.
And then they measure him as like, nope, you are exactly the same. Sorry to waste your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he starts getting these notifications. You must do these activities or pay a penalty.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, so he's in the hospital bed, and it's telling him like, do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups and 100 squats and run for a kilometer, and he's like,
Run for 10 kilometers.
10 kilometers, yeah,
Basically, the One Punch Man workout routine.
yeah, and of course he doesn't do it, so then the penalty is he's getting chased around by a what was that? That was a giant,
Like a giant sand centipede or something.
yeah, yeah,
Basically living in Dune for
yeah,
4 hours of trying to survive.
yeah. So then he starts doing all the daily exercises, and then he starts getting all these rewards from the game system, and then he goes into a dungeon inside a train station. Um,
And it is literally a hidden dungeon only he can enter because he's
right,
part of this part of this gamified system.
yeah, and then he realizes all the training he's been doing, he can actually like fight low level goblins and uh,
And even higher level monsters at that.
yeah. And then he's beating wolves and yeah.
Yeah, and so I gotta say, th- I so this show, how to put it, my problem with a lot of isekai or gamified fantasy stuff is that it very quickly starts feeling like the characters are living in easy mode.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds like that may happen later from what the coworker was telling me,
Hmm.
but episode 4, he is still having to work hard for what he gets.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's in a was episode 4, was that when he goes into the level C dungeon with the, or is that episode 5?
Episode 4,
Episode
yeah,
4,
like
yeah, okay.
with the giant snake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so you have this new. So basically, episode 4. The reason we watched episode 4 instead of the 3 episode rule is that episode 4 or episode 3 ends with him like in the middle of this dungeon. And it's like, okay, we're not going to get a sense of how this show is without seeing how this dungeon resolves.
Right, yeah. And there's also another part in there where there's like a golem that's outside the dungeon, and then he has a broken piece of his sword, and he just throws it, and it knocks the
Yeah,
golem's barrier down.
insta kill.
Yeah,
And so now it's like the elements are he's leveling up because of this system that forces him to train and partake of these activities. You have his semi girlfriend love interest who is traumatized by the horrors she saw in the first couple episodes, doesn't
yeah,
know that he has this power.
right,
No one knows that he has this power.
yeah.
Uh, and It's kind of unclear where it's going to go from there. But I will say,
Mhm.
so first off, the animation was in part done by A1 Studios, who I recall 10 years ago kind of had the reputation of being the McDonald's of Japanese animation.
Yeah, yeah, they did like, yeah, they've done like SAO and
That's
what
here.
else?
That's here. Darling in the Franks. That was more Studio Trigger, but A1 was like funding them or something.
Okay,
Um, they did a lot of things that were like SAO in terms of like story quality and everything.
yeah,
I think they also did Licorice Recoil if memory doesn't fail me.
yeah,
But I will say this show itself has some real visual flair. I don't know, that might just be them copying it from the manga or manhwa.
yeah. Yeah, no, the animation's really good. It's pretty fluid in places, especially in the fight scenes.
Yeah, the fight scenes really give you a nice sense of movement and energy, and you can feel the danger, even though you kind of objectively know, okay, the main character isn't going to die in the third episode after he's just gotten his powers. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I would actually continue watching this, which I can't think of the last fantasy anime with a gamified structure I could say that of.
yeah, yeah. Same here. Yeah, it's entertaining, and you definitely get a you definitely feel some sympathy for the protagonist and in his situation, and it's like, okay, well, this guy's he's been screwed over for a while, and now he's finally getting some power to
Right. You
do
definitely root for him.
yeah. Yeah, but and not real fan servicey. I noticed too. It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, the redhead girl is cute, but not in like a flashy way.
Right. Yeah. It's not like the hidden dungeon only I can enter. Bouncy, bouncy.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's actually, and also this might be I mean, so far it's the best manhwa I've seen turned into an anime, which that is not high praise between God of High School existing on levels of fast forward that X-Men 97 could only dream of towards the end.
Yeah.
Um, and then Tower of God existing at levels of time wasting that like you nothing really happens until the last episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez.
And then it's like it's a moment where you kind of really want a second season to happen, and it's apparently coming soon if it hasn't already.
mm,
But still, it's like oh, like
mm.
you were why did you tease us for so long with nothing?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like this one actually is like interesting from the start. So
Yeah.
good job.
Yes. It's on Crunchyroll, if anyone's interested in watching.
Yes, indeed. Um,
Mm.
transitions.
Uh,
S- Speaking of fast times and love
uh,
interests,
oh, there you go.
the most tenuous of associations.
Yeah. Yeah.
American Graffiti.
Yes, the movie that gave us Star Wars, and
Yeah.
it also helped George Lucas with the decision to not go through the studio system ever again when he wanted to make another movie. Just do it on his own.
Yeah. So American Graffiti, uh, I believe he was making it simultaneously or was working on it around the same time as THX.
Hmm. That sounds about right. Yeah.
And from the little bit I saw in my brief online research, Francis Ford Coppola, I believe, was recommending that he try a coming of age story.
Hmm.
And so George Lucas basically, it's the night of four teenagers, like on graduation night, but before a bunch of them are about to leave town to go seek their fortunes in the world.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
Set in 1962, Modesto, California, which this seems like it might be slightly autobiographical, considering that considering that George was from Modesto, California, and around the same time. And
Yes.
like some of the characters, he was also really big into the whole car racing scene.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think it's fair to say that this movie is very autobiographical.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so the four main characters that we got in this movie are Richard Dreyfuss's character, and his
Kurt.
name is Kurt. And then you got Ron Howard as Steven. And then you got Toad, who's Charles Martin Smith. The only other thing I remember him from was The Untouchables. Um, and then what was the hot rod guy? John, was it?
Paul Lamette
Paul Lamont, yeah.
as John.
John. Okay. Yeah. And so yeah, so as DB was saying, this was their last night together, and it is very much a slice of life story. There's there's no like driving conflict. There are conflicts, but there's no like overarching issue that the characters are, other than them leaving town. Um,
Right, and deciding if they want to leave town.
right, yeah, because Kurt's kind of waffling about whether or not he wants to leave. Steven definitely wants to leave. He wants to get out of that one horse town.
Sow some wild oats.
Yes, yeah, because he's hanging out with his girlfriend, who's Cindy Williams is the actress.
Who you may recognize from Laverne and Shirley.
Yes, and the, they're sitting in the car together eating their burgers and fries from their drive-in, or the car hop, and Stephen Ron Howard, or basically says, basically wants to have an open relationship.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, while we're apart, we don't necessarily have to only, we can see other people, because how else would we know if we really love each other?
Yeah.
Which, like, man, that's some modern open marriage logic right there.
Oh yeah. um, and then you got Kurt, he's riding in the back seat of the car, and then he spots Suzanne Summers in a Ford T-Bird, and then he immediately falls in love, and so he spends most of the night trying to find her, and getting into trouble along the way.
Yep. Then you got Terry, who Steve has given his beloved car, who immediately, as all of us might, decides to go out and use this really nice car to go pick up chicks.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he picks up one chick, and then she wants him to buy booze. Of course, he's underage, so he's got to find a clever way to do it, and he does the old trick of standing outside the liquor store and asking people, "Hey, I lost my ID. Can you buy me a bottle of whiskey?"
Yeah, he pulls that thing like, you're going, oh, I'll take one pencil, and oh yeah, copy that magazine, and oh yeah, and a bottle of Kentucky Dry. Like,
Yeah.
okay, where's your ID? Oh, sorry, left my ID outside my car, and my car's at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you got
Yeah.
they got John out there, basically trolling the town, looking for people to race.
Yeah, and then he runs into this one car with a group of girls, and he's trying to get one of them in his car, and they're like, "Oh, so and so's little sister will ride with you." Like, "Oh yeah, okay," and it's she's like 12 years old.
It's like, oh, you meant little sister, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the girl the actress's name was Mackenzie Phillips, and she was on a sitcom back in the late 70s, called was it One Day at a Time, I think is what it
Yep,
was.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and one of the stories about the behind the scenes stuff when they were making the movie, uh, apparently like just they all stayed at like a Days Inn type thing, and they all just hung around the pool and got drunk between scenes. And apparently Mackenzie Phillips was doing that, which is like, oh, she's only 12. That's,
Yeah, arrested for cocaine possession.
mhm. Yeah, she definitely had one of the troubled child star lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, yeah. So but what's interesting about the movie, and I think my father pointed this out, is that everything that they do in this movie, there are consequences. Like if they do something bad, there's a consequence for it. So like Terry, for instance, when he gets the alcohol and then he goes drinking with the girl, one, the car gets stolen.
Yeah, they make the bright decision, like, oh, we got to have radio in the background while we make out, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, hold on a second, the music stopped. So what does that mean? It means that the music stopped and the car's going. Come on.
Yeah. and then two, he gets sick because he drank too much.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Meanwhile, Paul Lamont, or excuse me, John, like the
yeah,
race car driver, uh, he actually kind of has the most blameless night of all of them. So he has the least bad things happen to him.
that's true. Yeah. Of course he's got Harrison Ford looking for him because he wants to race him.
Yep.
You
Harrison
know.
Ford in a in a cowboy hat.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing his best. Hey, come on!
And then yeah, Ron, just for being a continuous sleazeball, ends up really like driving his girlfriend into the arms of Harrison Ford.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Because then he has the epiphany that, oh, gee, well, maybe I shouldn't be pushing her away.
Yeah, maybe I don't have to leave town to find myself.
Yeah,
Maybe I like her a lot.
yeah, and then of course he had Kurt, Richard Dreyfuss, who he runs afoul of street toughs or street punks,
The
the
Pharaohs.
pharaohs. Yeah, and he actually impresses them, which is
This is not good for him.
no, it's not good for him. But then of course he's trying to find he's trying to find Suzanne Summers, and he ends up going to the radio station where Wolfman Jack is working.
Which that's thanks for bringing up Wolfman Jack.
Yeah,
So Wolfman Jack was an actual DJ who was really popular at the time,
yeah,
and he that is actually Wolfman Jack recording stuff for this movie.
yeah,
And he like there isn't really a driving conflict, but he is a constant thread in the movie, like
yeah.
because he's providing the period appropriate soundtrack as they're going.
Yeah, and then of course, like all the stories they're telling about him, like, oh, he's got a, he's up in space and he's broadcasting from up there, and like apparently,
Oh,
like,
it's a pirate radio station, and they can't shut him down.
yeah, they used to tell stories about him like that, like, oh, he's up on the
Yeah,
moon, and yeah,
yeah. But and they do use the soundtrack a few times to some really good effects.
hmm
What was the song that started playing when Terry was trying to steal his car back, and
oh,
he realized that the people are standing over him. It was like
oh
a
God, what
perfect
was it?
musical sting. It was like,
Yeah, I
"Hello,
know.
baby."
Yes, it was.
That was
Yeah,
it.
hello.
The big bopper.
Yeah.
The other thing that the soundtrack did is that I had actually seen this movie in high school, although I didn't remember too much of it.
Mhm.
And I had it in my head that this was a 50s period piece, but it's actually 1962. But they kind of say that the 60s, as we think of them, didn't really start till like 63 or so.
Yeah. Yeah, because yeah, probably right around when Kennedy was done in.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was the turning point. And they even mentioned that too with Richard Dreyfuss, was that, oh, he's going to be a aide to President Kennedy.
Right. His dream is to shake hands with President Kennedy.
Right. Yeah.
Now, as far as other aspects of the movie, because Daniel said, there really isn't a driving conflict for it. It is interesting hearing George Lucas style dialogue in non-fantasy or sci-fi scenarios,
Yeah.
because like some of the dialogue it feels really natural, some of it doesn't. Also, I'll say that there is one sort of contradiction to your dad's thought that bad things happen to people who do bad things.
Yeah.
Kurt doesn't really suffer any consequences of helping the pharaohs steal a bunch of coins from some friends at the Moose Lodge.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, or ripping the axle out of the police car.
Yeah, that kind of goes unpunished.
That's true. Yeah, but
Uh,
yeah,
I think that the interactions I enjoyed the most were Paul Lamont with the young girl, just because she seemed to know the power she had to ruin his life if she wanted to.
Yeah. Which, yeah, of course, yeah. Even then, people were wary of stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep. Like their interactions were just charming, as he was just kind of annoyed with this young girl who was wanting to feel very adult, being on this car ride.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and then they even like they even play pull a little prank or pull a little stunt on one on a car.
Yeah,
I think they had like a water balloon. They threw like a water balloon at her, and then they like,
like
all
a
right,
can
let's.
of had a can of shaving cream
Right, yeah,
or silly string or something along those lines.
yeah,
Uh, but most of the storylines do kind of come together at the end, where John finally gets to have his race with Harrison Ford,
mm,
with Laurie in the car with him.
yeah, and then Steven shows up, because he's like, oh my god, my girlfriend's in this drag race, and
That kind of scares him straight.
yeah, yeah, and then of course, then as the race is going, Harrison Ford's car spins out and rolls. And of course, they both get out of the car, and not a scratch on them, and
Yeah, like the boy for 1970s or actually 1960s cars, where I doubt that they had seatbelts.
no,
That's the most. Maybe this was a science fantasy movie all along.
yeah,
But now, as far as interesting outside of the movie aspects of it, uh, this was another movie kind of like The Sting, where it was made on a pretty small budget, but it had a huge gross.
yeah,
You see why Fox was willing to give this kid a shot on his stupid space movie.
yes, yeah, and of course, you mentioned that it made a lot of money, but I don't know how much of that Lucas saw.
Probably not much of it.
Probably not, yeah, because that was a big thing with Star Wars, was that having those licensing rights, having, like, especially with the toys. Even though the deal he made with Kenner was not a good one for him, but
Well, more than he would have gotten classically if he'd done a standard Fox contract.
true, yeah, um,
So I gotta say that overall, on a second watch of this, is it weird to say that I liked the individual scenes more than I liked them strung together?
no, I could see that, yeah.
I kept thinking to myself that you could have taken just about any of these stories and you could have probably spun a whole movie out of them.
Yeah, you could have. Yeah, it would have been like that episode of The Simpsons when they were going through all those different stories.
Yeah, like the 33 stories from Springfield, 34 stories from Springfield.
Yes, which has the classic steamed hams.
Yeah, but I more mean like say storyline: hot rod driver ends up with a 12-year-old girl in his car with him when he was expecting a girl his own age,
Yeah,
and go spin out a whole movie.
yeah,
Um, but guy who's about to go to leave town to go to college on a scholarship, but he wants to play the field, but his girlfriend doesn't want him to go, and go.
yeah,
That's more what I mean.
yeah.
So I,
Okay.
I think
Well,
that like I also felt my attention drifting quite a bit, which is weird because like I'd occasionally realize that I had lost attention, go back, watch a scene, and go, "Well, that scene was totally fine. What's going on here?"
yeah,
So like, I would say for me at least, the whole is less than the sum of its parts. But I can't really complain too much about any of the individual scenes.
yeah. It's yeah, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and I do think that it had definitely for people of that generation, I think it speaks to them probably more so than us. Because I mean, this was our parents and grandparents' generations. They were,
Right.
yeah. And the thought of just getting in our cars and cruising along a street and talking to our friends across the lanes was just like nah,
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah, this just seems weird. It's definitely a slice. Like it is a very exacting slice of a certain period of time
Yeah.
of that long 50s.
Right. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I can see why like it okay, well, and I think that might the reason like the whole is less than the sum of its parts is because like I was saying that there was no overarching conflict. There was no, there was nothing like, you know, some catastrophe that was waiting to happen.
Right. Well, aside from apparently one of them dying in Vietnam afterwards, but
Well, yeah, and then the other one getting killed by a drunk driver. Um,
which I forget. It wasn't Dreyfus's character who got killed by the drunk driver.
no, it was John. It was the hot
That's right.
rod
Okay.
driver.
So that's right. Because he'd even been talking about somebody else who had died that same way, which is kind of funny in a
Yeah,
tragic way.
yeah. And then yeah, and Dreyfus he was a writer.
In Canada, of all places.
Yeah, and Ron Howard was selling insurance.
Still back in Modesto.
Yeah,
He had the most mundane of them all, so his came last in the what they all went to do.
yeah,
But I would say this movie is, it's definitely historically important, especially in light of Star Wars.
yeah,
Um, I'm reasonably certain that this is why Harrison Ford tried out for Han Solo.
yeah, yeah. He was working as a carpenter on the movie.
Hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, and Lucas remembered him, and he went, "Oh, hey, I'm doing this space movie. You want to do an audition for it?" And but yeah, it is kind of weird though that like yeah that because that he thought of Harrison Ford so late, and then he did the same thing with Indiana Jones. Because Indiana Jones, they originally wanted Tom Selleck.
Oh, that's right. Well, I mean, at the time, Thomas Selleck was the big movie star, so
Yeah, yeah, but he was too busy doing Magnum PI, so he couldn't do it. But yeah, I mean, definitely check this movie out.
mhm.
It's currently on Netflix, although I think it's still. I don't think it's leaving anytime soon.
Yeah, I didn't see any sort of notification like that was leaving soon. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, we actually got hit by that with a movie we had intended to review a few weeks back, where it's just gone from all streaming platforms.
yeah, it was. Yeah, what was that? Uh, oh, it was The Longest Yard.
That's right. Yeah, the original non-Adam Sandler version,
Yeah, yeah, we were going to do that, and then it got pulled, and then we ended up doing The Addams Family.
which probably would have ended up liking The Longest Yard better, but streaming is a cyclical business. It'll show up somewhere at some point.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, but um, but yeah, I think we've said all we need to say.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So a slightly eclectic week, though. As long as we have X-Men still putting on episodes, it's going to continue to be eclectic for us. So,
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always.
indeed.
Hit, yeah, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye,
Thanks for
everybody.
joining us, everyone.